Hey, it's Joe West from the West Barn with
Mike Shimshack.
And today we've got Mike Payne, studio guitarist, touring guitarist, and great dude. I love Mike Payne. You can check out his credits on All Music. They're page after page after page. But I have been knowing Mike for quite a while, and Mike, both of us have hired him to be in the studio, and he's probably my go-to guy the last maybe 3 years. My go-to guy, maybe one or two or three guys that I'll call and be excited about having them come in and be the guitar player for the session. So thanks for coming on, Mikey.
Hey, man, pleasure.
How are you doing? You're from your house today?
Yeah, doing good. I'm thankful for the rain. We have a nice rainy Thursday morning, and we've needed it. So,
are you one of those guys that likes the rain? Some people like overcast, cloudy days. Some people like the sun blaring.
You know, I will say, I do like a good rainy day, but too much of it gets me a little down. Like, we have a rainy winter in Nashville. I don't know if many people realize that, but
it's like London.
It's a bit like London, and I think, you know, sort of late winter. We're so excited for the spring to come around, and because we get more than our fair share.
Well, yeah, I grew up in Pittsburgh. It was like there was a weird moniker that it had, like the second least sunshiny city. So I don't know what that means, but it was the second least sunshiny city. And really? I can remember just thinking to myself, man, it sure would be great. And then you get to Nashville, and then and it's like, okay, you got a rainy winter, but then the summer comes, and you're like, all right, already. Whenever it gets to be 100 degrees every day, and you're like, I'm over it. Yeah. And then it's kind of overdoes everything as it goes through the year. You know, you have this fall lasts for about 8.5 minutes.
Right.
And you're right into the rain, you know, and then you go from seedling flower to blazing sun. So you have a really small spring too.
It's so true. It's so true. And I feel like those of us that have been here a while know that to be true. And when we like celebrate that eight minutes of fall that we get. In fact, Jimmy Lee on session, it's very common for him in the fall to like be very up and excited about, you know, like the one day of like cool and clear sunny weather.
Yeah, it's like let's go apple picking or something that you would do.
Where are you from originally, Mike?
I'm originally from out just west of Chicago, a town called Rockford, Illinois. It's sort of
Cheap Trick,
known as the home of the Trick guys, and
nice.
Well, we think that you're a great guitar player, and that's an odd thing. You know, there's so many great guitar players. Why choose Mike Payne?
Yeah,
right. There's like they're piled on top of each other like songs on Music Row. So why choose Mike Payne? And I have to ask myself that question. And it's like, well, I choose Mike Payne because he's a great guitar player. Yeah. Tones are always very rarely do I struggle more than one little suggestion. Like, oh, what if it was a little bit more like this? And then it's like you grab that and it's perfect. So the tones are effortless with you. The performance is always great. And you're such a great hang. But it's just, there's something about how easy it is to get to what it is I want to get to as a creator. You know, it's never more than one ask for you, and you're right on purpose and right on target with tone, sound, and performance. So, Mike, what would you say it would be for you? Like, why would you hire Mike Payne over hiring anyone else in town?
Same deal. I mean, for me personally, it's, you know, Mike is one of the few guys in Nashville that sounds legit when you ask him to play pop guitar. And it's a very different thing. I don't think people to me, there's a huge distinction. You know, they're guys, I don't know. It sounds legit when Mike does it. So for me personally, not doing a ton of country, you know, I know he does country really well, but for me and what I produce, Mike understands pop music very well, like a real, you know, like almost like an LA. A lot of times
it feels like these country guys are doing like a mockumentary of pop. Like it's like, oh, I know. Yeah. Like when a rock guy picks up and does a little bit of chicken picking, you can tell it's not sincere.
Right. Exactly. So Mike seems to have a pretty good grasp of how to make it feel. I'm sure it's because we probably come from similar backgrounds musically, that I like his playing. So, you know.
Yeah. Well, first off, thanks. I'm glad that you appreciate that about my playing. And I think you're right. I think maybe we do come from a similar background in what we the kind of things we like. And you, I think you guys both have me, you know, pegged a little bit there with the pop thing. And I really grew up listening to primarily, you know, my introduction to was like Fleetwood Mac, Rumors. I know that's you know, that's pretty popular, obviously, but that was kind of a launching pad for me, and a ton of 60s pop too. So pop music has always been my number one influence throughout the years. And, you know, I can, when country started leaning more pop, I felt like, okay, I have something to say here, you know,
right.
Like, whereas before I always felt a little bit like a fish out of water, if that makes sense with that, you know, cause there are guys that can just get in and just nail that sort of 70s, 80s, I don't know, 90s. They grew up in the pop, or not the pop country, but in the country world. And that hasn't really been my backstory. So
well, nor Mike Shimshack's or mine. Like, people will talk about country because they're in country and they'll reference things, and it's the dark ages for me. I don't know anything about that era of, it's like my era with country kind of started with like Kenny Rogers, you know, but just the stuff that transitioned, and Dolly Parton and the Mandrell sisters,
the crossover stuff,
just the crossover stuff. But my history with country really started with like, oh, Rascal Flatts, Keith Urban. And then all of a sudden it was like, hey, I could go here, but it was like this intersection of my genre, and like I have zero backflow into the country integrity that a lot of people know about. All these dudes who I wish I could rattle off a list right now, but I don't know them. To proves my point is that there is a bunch of guys like us who were born and bred on like everything from the Cars to AC/DC, you know, all the way up to Tears for Fears and Journey, right? And Styx.
Yeah.
So, and then we all just became country guys. So then we kind of hijacked country.
Right. It's really, that's a great way to say it.
We just kind of did it. Yeah. And the reality is, I think the lens of what this conversation is like is, hey, if you're a guitar player anywhere in the United States, you've silently, if for nothing else, silently, you've said to yourself, man, maybe I'll move to Nashville and be a session musician. Wonder if I could cut it. Right? Like, I think that's the lens of what we're sort of the aura of what we're talking about here. And if I were that guy and I got to see this podcast and see you, I think what I'd want to know is like, hey, first of all, do I think I could cut it? Why do people choose people? Why do people get work? Why do they not get work? We've been talking a little bit about that. But it's like, I think you just gravitate towards people that you think that you would as if you went into a cafeteria in high school, right? It's like, what seat are you whose table are you gonna sit at? And those are the guys you work with.
Yeah,
those you make sure they're good from a proficiency standpoint, being a good player. But like, I would hang out with you in high school, whether you liked it or not.
100%.
I would want to hang out with you because I enjoy you. And I think that people underestimate that. They think like, oh, I'm going to come to town with these big chops and I'm going to blow everybody's doors off. And I'm going to be the next big thing. And they don't really think about what Mike Shimshack always brings up is the hang. Why people, you've got to be a good hang. When that hang can be in the session, you've got to be a guy that when the session's going is like, you know how to just sort of carry the load of the environment of what it requires to make a great record. You got to fit in. You got to stick out when you need to stick out. You got to lay back when you got to lay back. You got to have a funny line here to make sure that it's just this whole thing. You've got to be able to keep it copacetic. There's a whole chemistry in one part of that is being a great guitar player.
Yeah.
That's what gets you in the door.
Yeah. Mike, you, what is your background in terms of getting to where you are in Nashville right now? Like, I know you were heavy in the Christian music scene for a while, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's really kind of where it started. Actually, it was a little bit of a mix. I came to Nashville in about 2000, did at Belmont, and then got, from there, I had some country, couple country road traveling gigs. There was a time where I did that, and I was always in like doing bands and filling in for people, and like I was like, and then I became like a true sideman, where I was really like I was working for solo artists and acts like Matthew West,
right?
Matthew, and there's a gal named Natalie Grant, Brandon Heath, a lot of the gospel Christian acts. I was just they knew me, and they, at that time, I think, getting back to where we just came from with regard to sort of where we land stylistically and just with where our nuances and our playing is. So coming from that pop background, that's where CCM was at that time.
Yeah,
it was just like, it was
exactly
super pop. It was mimicking what was happening out in Los Angeles and in New York. So I felt like that was a great little fit for me. I was jumping into those gigs and so really at the beginning it was all about traveling and hanging out and having fun. And, when you're 21 or whatever it was, that's really, the session thing wasn't really on my radar at that point. I had done a few things here and there. A roommate of mine had a Pro Tools, like one of the first like Pro Tools rigs, and from the late 90s. And so he had a couple independent projects going on, and so I would, hey, I'll play guitar on, coach, like
right.
I'll play on a few things, and so I did that. And it wasn't until I started connecting with songwriters. There's a company, BMG Music was up at Provident, the building in Cool Springs. Anyway, a friend of mine got signed there as a writer, and he called me up one day and said, "Hey, Mike, we've been writing these songs. I'd like to demo them. Can you bring a small rig out and put some guitars on these songs?" And that was like the first. That was my first call.
Wow, that's cool.
And then just sort of once I got in that environment, I was like, this is fun. This is cool. I liked the research aspect of it. Like I would finish the session and like go home and like analyze, what I did and try to get my sounds better. And then listening, I was always listening to what was coming out of Los Angeles, especially at that time. Guys like John Shanks, and who's the Canadian producer that did like the first Katy Perry record, brilliant guy.
Greg Wells.
Greg Wells was a pretty huge influence. John, all these guys. And so I was like a sponge.
That's cool.
Like, okay, this is like pop, guitar, rock. They were reaching into all the cool stuff from the 80s and 70s and kind of this big blend of everything, and I just couldn't get enough. So really that was kind of the launching
so you
point.
if you had let's say you're on the road, how long did it take you once you moved to Nashville to transition from road work being your primary focus to studio work?
It took me probably nearly 10 years.
Okay, so that's long.
Yeah.
That's long.
Yeah. I mean, by the time I was at the point where I could I didn't need the road thing so much. I had enough work in town. It was right about 9 years. It was 9 years.
Oh, that's much better.
Yeah.
So tell me what that is. When you got into the studio where you're like, oh no, I need to, live, you can fake being a great guitar player, right? Yeah. You got to be a great guitar player. This is like best guy at your high school kind of level guitar player, right?
Yep.
those guys got on the road, and then everyone starts saying, man, he's an amazing guitar player. You got to get him in the studio. And then inevitably they make their way into the studio because someone is like forcing you as a producer to bring this guitar player in, and they just fall apart in the studio because it's just a different thing, right? Did you notice that going into the studio, that it was like, wait a minute, this is, I'm transparent because I've only got an inch of depth and I only have this X, Y, and Z lick, and I can I don't have the scalability to get into the studio.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, 100%. I mean, I felt like, and maybe a lot of guys feel this way, but like in my head, I was like, okay, I know I've got chops. Like, I know I can play. I've been playing for a long time now. But the thing that for me was the sort of my Achilles heel, and still is to a large degree, is just like the feel. It's one thing to be able to shred the guitar, and that's awesome, and I totally appreciate that ability. But the feel and playing to different feels, right? Like a certain song is going to have real, like, I don't know, kind of a straight eights.
Or being able to adapt when the producer says, hey, play on the front of the beat. Or really, really lay back on the backside of the beat of this, and it's a totally different song.
It's a totally different thing. And learning when to do that, right? When to push it and when to lay it back.
It's almost like, have you ever seen those drawings where you stare at them long enough and they pop into 3D?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Like, that's the difference between playing in front of the beat, playing on the beat, or playing behind the beat, and to being able to do it and truly own it, so that you start to do that thing where it's black dude at church. I used to watch the black session players at church, and I'd watch where their feet, where like this guy's playing bass, I'd watch his foot tapping, and I'm like, I don't have no idea what he's feeling right now, but it's like I could never tap my foot where he's tapping and play what he's playing. There is like an altered sense of like a juggler would learn, right? Motor sense. And to be a great session player, you've got to be able to have a conversation and say, I know what you're feeling. Yeah. Watch this. This is what you're feeling. Rather than I'm going to play and we're talking literally to one another. Someone tells you something. A guy like you can take it and say, hey, I know what he means. And I'm going to give him 3 options of what he means, which great guitar players on the road are playing the same. If you're opening up, you're playing the same 6 songs for the entire summer versus a guy that's got to come in and play on 5, 6, 10 songs on an album and be the guy that parts will be great enough that people will play them all summer as a touring guitar player. Right. So, that's the kind of thing where you go from physically being able to do it as a guitar player or a session player, but then you have this mental part where your brain becomes symbiotic and understanding what things need. That's a giant leap, and you've got that. Bukovec's got that. There's McPherson's got that. There's guys that whenever I hire them to come in and do a record, I know I've got that covered, and all I have to do is tell you how I feel. Right? Me and you don't argue about parts ever. And we usually get to the heart of the matter. Like I said earlier, one of the first things I said about you is it's like I could just tell you, I could give you, like, it's one conversation. Like, oh, do you think maybe a humbucker would be better for this? And we could go really, like, let's think Journey. And next thing you know what I want to feel, and you do it. So you're like this easy transition for me as a creator, which I really appreciate.
So it's like a language, right? It's like you learn this vernacular, excuse me, and then you're in it, and we can communicate with these nuances. And a lot of times the communication happens without it's all these little nonverbals too that's happening throughout the day, and where the drummer, where the in-betweens are, and the backbeat, and it's just so much. It's so much fun. There's just so much nuance to it. It's like the coolest job, really.
I would say that you have maybe I'd have to say you probably have the best tone.
Oh man.
Maybe there's another couple people that there's a ton of guys with great tone, but your tone is like that. Holy crap! Look at the speaker's tone, right? It's like, and he comes with maybe one little head. Like he walks in like one trip, it feels like to me at my studio with his gear, right? Because we don't do, I'm sure you have a big cartage rig that comes in the back of a truck, but we don't do that at my studio. Guys usually just carry in their stuff. And I have a Bogner 212 cabinet that you use.
Which I love, and I've threatened to take many times.
Several people have. So you plug in this little license plate amp. Who makes those again?
It's Analog Outfitters.
Yeah, and it's a retooled B3 Leslie amplifier.
Yeah, absolutely. So these guys out of Illinois, they take old B3 organs and the transformers and the Leslies and stuff, and they repurpose them, because a lot of these B3s have been either they're not working and not in good working order anymore. They were sitting in a church for 100 years or something, and
they've been replaced by a keyboard. So there's a lot of like Leslie 120 cabinets out there, probably.
Totally. And so they had this idea to start building guitar amps out of the parts. And I actually went to their shop once. It was a huge warehouse, and like they had everything in these neat rows of like the key that they'd take the keyboards out, and those were in one row, and then the transformers were in another, and then they would save all the wood and they made all their speaker cabinets out of the
wow.
The wood from the Leslies and things. So really creative guys, and they made these amps for a long time. And the one I like is called the Sarge, and it's like a 20-watt amp, and it sounds great. It's very
It looks like a lunch pail almost. I mean, it's not big. It's probably right?
Yeah.
But it's like, just pick it up. It's not like this heavy 100-watt Mark II Marshall, right? Or a basement amplifier.
Totally.
It's this easy thing, and you plug right in, and it's like, and let's face it, that's one of those things where you'd say, hey, and these guys are assholes that do this, by the way, where you say, hey, man, I love that. That guitar sounds great. And it says, well, why don't you play it? See how it's right. Okay, I get it. You're great. Right. I'm not. But I don't know if it's that amp in particular, or if it's just that brand and that amp series, or if it's your fingers. But every guitar you plug in, there's a great tone. And the only way I can explain it is like, there's times when you plug into your amp directly from your guitar, and there's something going on, right? It's like the tubes are the bias and the lifespan of the tube and the power coming out of the wall. And it's like, and you hit a chord and you get this power transfer. They call it, in amplification, they'll talk about it as power transfer in dampening, like how much of the wave is efficient. Like the actual transfer
like
of
sag
energy. Yeah. Well, sag would be lower power draw, right? If you're browning out. But there's this thing that happens when you hit a guitar and you're plugged right into an amp that is so alive that a lot of times when we complain about guitar tones, we'll be like, I just don't know. But when it's right, Yeah. And every time you plug in, it feels like that to me. You can put a 57 on it. You can put a Royer 122. You can put a U67 on it. It doesn't matter. It's like you turn it on, you look at the speakers, and you go, whoa, every time.
Yeah.
And he's carrying it in like backpack of guitars in like this little amp.
Small pedalboard.
It's really, really good. I think that's a tribute to you.
Well, no, thank you, Joe. That's huge. And tone is something I've always been a big appreciator of. And like your comment about it feeling alive, I think that's a really great way to describe it, because that's what I'm looking for. Like, I'm looking for that connection that I feel and I hear, and it's going to jump out of the speakers. And I think that's something I learned early on. One of the first, this was just a quick story, but when I was in high school, I saw the Cheap Trick guys play. They did a local area, like music awards banquet kind of thing. It was called the Rammies, Rockford Area Music Awards, or whatever. And the Trick guys showed up at the like the dinner thing that they do, right? To award the bands or whatever that won in the respective categories. Anyway, it was I watched Rick get on stage. They didn't bring any gear with him, right? He just had his I think he was playing. I think he just was playing his Les Paul, and plugged straight into the amp that was on stage, and dimed it. You know, I think it was like a Reynolds Marshall amp or something. And I was like, and the tone was just, and again, it's the way he hits and the way that, but it just was so like, oh my gosh, like he's plugged straight in, and it's just that magic, alive, bright and full, and everything is just like, so that was like the kind of my first taste of like, holy cow, that's great tone, in my opinion, you know, in my head. And then, you know, getting to work with guys in the studio, sort of, you know, especially early on, that had, you know, great tone, like, helped me out a lot too. Like, you know, working with Kenny Greenberg, early on, he produced a record for Matthew. And so I got to go to his studio and record overdubs on Matthew's record. And he let me use, like, plug into like way he had his stuff set up. And I just remember going, oh man, oh wow, okay. Like,
let me interrupt you real quick. Half of getting great tones is being exposed to them.
Yeah.
At that level. And then it's like, you may not know how to get it in the future, but you know that you're not there.
Totally.
And it's like that. And then you eventually learn the process to be able to do it yourself. But half of it is knowing what you don't want, you know, and that's being exposed. I have the same story you're telling me. No, I have that in regards to songwriting, in regards to engineering and producing and mixing. I have that same story in what the things that I focus on. But it's like, it taught me to say, like, we're not there yet.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a crucial part to getting there, is knowing when you're not there.
100%, man.
So go back. I'm sorry I interrupted. Go ahead.
Well, no, I just, like, you know, he was the one that, so he was using a matchless amp at that time, which I think he's still using. A lot of us guys still use those, Bukovac included, and but he encouraged me to. I found one. A friend of mine had an old '90s matchless, and he was selling it, so I bought it, and I used that amp on the road for years. It was like my go-to, and I got really comfortable. So standing behind that amp every night, just like connecting with it, and that chime, but it still had the bottom end, like a Fender-ish bottom end. And I don't know how they did it. They're just geniuses, you know, that they made this amp. It was so good. That imprint was just, it sort of just sealed it in my head. And that's what you say, like, understanding what it is, and then going from there, like, because now I can bring the Sarge amp to the out, and I can get it, you know, kind of to that sweet spot, and
right.
And there's other amps I can do that with too.
So when you come into a session, you usually have a old 335, Shaw era 335. You've got a Les Paul, which is maybe a little bit redundant with a 335, right? I mean, maybe you could get some things with the 335 you can't get with the Paul, right? And you've got a Fender, sort of like Strat thing. What else is there that's essential in your essential bag of, hey, I got to if I'm going to self cartage, what do I have to drag in from the car? Those three guitars plus what?
Yeah, so the 335 like has come in and out, but lately it's been in, like, big time, and I've been playing it over the Les Paul lately. Some people call them the burst killers. You know, you've heard that.
Oh, wow. No, I haven't heard that, but I get it.
Yeah, there's just, man, they just sit in a track so well, and they have such good, I don't know if it's something about the scale length or the way that the construction is of the guitar, but they have this super clear, it's like a Les Paul with more clarity or something.
Right.
And like a little, it's not as muddy in the low end. Like anyway, it's just great. So it'll be the 335, and then usually I'll take a Tele with me because I love Telecasters. So
Tele and a Strat?
Well, a lot of times it'll just be the Telecaster.
Okay.
For me.
So single coil, you're going to be using a Tele.
Typically.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Some of that might just be due to I've been looking for a good Strat, I love Strats for certain songs, but I have kind of a love-hate with Strats. I think that they can get, at least in my experience, it just has to be, it's so song specific to me with a Strat. Whereas a Tele, I can actually get it to sound Stratty if I want to. Like I can go on the neck pickup with a couple little EQ changes, and I can get into that kind of, neck pickup Strat thing. Whereas I can't really get into Tele territory on the back pickup with a Strat.
So you've got Les Paul 335 Tele.
Yeah.
And that's every session. Is there anything else that you drag along?
Yeah, sometimes I'll drag. I've got a Gretsch, one of the
right.
Ryan Setzer, the 6120 reissues.
Right.
And it's a great guitar, and I'll bring that out on certain things.
So you can travel, you can get yourself loaded up and ready to go for a session in a matter of 15 minutes. Throw your amp in, throw your head in, throw in your pedal board, which we'll talk about in a second, but throw in these 3 or 4 guitars, and you're off to the races. What's on your pedal board? Like it's not giant, but what is your go-to pedal board in front of this amplifier?
Yeah, so I'm actually, it's down here at my feet right now. So it's obviously it's gone through some changes over the years, but large.
Well, talk about the sections of it. You've got distortion section, you've got a modulation and delay section, right? How do you divide your pedal board up? I start with I'm a compressor guy. I like that little squish. Again, it's probably like the LA coming out in me a little bit, right? It's like I'm not slamming it. I'm not dynacomping or anything like that, but I'm just getting a subtle squish, particularly with like single coil guitars. So that's the first thing you go into is a compressor?
Yeah. That's the first thing I go into.
Which one do you use?
Right now I'm using the Fermata by XTS. It's an optical. It's an optical compressor, and I like it. It's definitely a little more subtle than some of the other ones. I've used the Exotic Pedal Company makes one called the SP compressor, which is like a mini pedal. I like that one a lot.
Is that the one that was like the front end of the Echoplex or something? Wasn't that?
Yeah, they made it.
It's like really thin little pedal.
Yeah. It looks exactly like that. It looks exactly like that. It has 2 knobs. It's called the SP, and I've had really good luck with that. So right now it's the XTS. Sometimes it's the other one, the SP. And then I'll go into some kind of a booster. Sometimes it's like a ZVEX, Box of Rock, and I'll have that. Like, I love the boost side on that. It's so good. Sometimes it's the Exotic RC booster, and I like the RC because I like the EQ.
Can you tell me what I get it, but why do guitar players use boost? Like, it's not like it's a boost to come up into a solo. It's like they'll just do it to bring the line gain up, or the instrument level up on their board. What are they getting with that?
Well, it just colors it. It colors a little bit. Like, some people call it transparent, but I don't really view it like that. I think it actually colors the tone and thickens things up a little bit. And also, I like to use it in conjunction with other pedals, like stacking. So I will click on the RC and maybe, like a...
Oh, so it's not on all the time.
Like a Nobles or something, and pair those 2 together, where I'm just hitting the Nobles a little harder.
Get it. Yeah. So you don't leave it on all the time?
No.
Got it. That makes more sense. I thought guys were just putting it on and leaving it on all the time. Like,
yeah, that's not what I do with it.
All right, so compressor to boost pedal and then into distortion.
Yeah, I'll go into distortion stuff or overdrives. let's see. Oh, I left out. I've been using a fuzz on the front end too. Just like an old tone bender.
So before the compressor?
Yeah, that'll be the first thing I go into.
Like we're talking like a big muff pedal kind of fuzz?
More like think like Jimmy Page off of the first record, kind of that sort of tone bender type thing. So anyway, so yeah, let's see. And then I go into overdrives. So it'd be like either like I'll just name them. I still like the Timmy. I know that that's an old pedal at this point, but I like it because it has that clarity to it. Like it doesn't get muddy because it has the bass control on it. And I'm always cutting low end. That's another thing. And okay, so maybe my ears don't like to hear as much low end sometimes, but there's certain frequencies that can muddy up, right? We know that. So that's always been, if I'm struggling to get a tone, sometimes I'll just reach down and just trim a little bit of the low end off.
Right.
And sometimes that heals it.
Oh, dude, as a record producer, like we're grateful because people that just focus on guitar want the guitar to be so big. But like I've heard you talk about this. I've heard Bukovac talk about this. I've heard a lot of guitar players that are great session guys say low end is like the enemy of guitar in a mix. It's like
Can be.
At the end of the day, when you're on a rock record or a pop record where we're fighting for level and it's a big mix, it's like kick drum, bass guitar. Those things are going to dominate everything from 200 hertz down. So it's like, why would you put your guitar onto the fray with that stuff? It's like, oh, make it speak at 260 to 300, and then maybe a little bit from 800 to 1.2K, somewhere in there, right? And then leave out the high end too. Like, don't be cranking 6 and 8K into your guitars because it's like that's where the vocals are. That's where the snap of the drums are. So, yeah, you need to fit into a mix, but a lot of guitar players aren't mixing, so they're just hearing their amp, getting what they want out of it, and they don't realize, hey, I'm going to lose out once this gets inserted into the full mix. So I love that I hear you say that.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I think that's why maybe some of us have been talking about the low-end piece. And so in certain pedals, like you got to be careful because like I know myself, I have like I'm a little touch and go with a pedal like, I mentioned the Timmy already, but the Nobles ODR1, right? I'm a little on and off that pedal and it's great, and I know a lot of guys use it and love it, but sometimes I feel like, man, I just can't get rid of maybe it's just the one I have too. I don't know. They're all a little different, I guess, but the low end in that pedal can sometimes get a little on the woofy side of things. So that's kind of coming on and off the board. Let's see what else. I don't know, man. There's a bunch of cool stuff. I'll tell you for like sort of hot rodded Marshall type amp in a box. The Z-Bax, the Boxer Rock is great. I already mentioned that. I use that on a ton of records. And I also use this pedal. It's called the Caveman Overdrive. I think it's called the Caveman Overdrive. But it has that real kind of like that Marshall, like it's real kind of percussive and and it's bright. And so I use that pedal.
Like a Mark II rather than a JCM 800.
Yeah. It's exactly. So I'll use that on things.
So are you using multiple? Like a lot of guys will have like, oh, this is my distortion. This is my heavy distortion. And then here's my crazy over-the-top distortion pedal in various like, oh, I'll leave this one on and put this one on too. Do you have a staging situation in your distortion or no?
Sometimes I'll stack. And it is kind of arranged in stages, I guess. I'm using a smaller board right now, and if I had a little bit more real estate, I would so the Caveman, for instance, lives in my little pedal bag, right? So I'll just have that on the side, and if I need to plug it in, I got it there.
So it's one distortion pedal per at a time primarily on your pedal board?
With distortions, yeah.
Okay.
Because it's overdrives. I think I can get away with more stacking or pairing. With distortions, usually it's like it's kind of one or the other.
Oh, wait a minute. What's the difference between overdrive and distortion? I thought they were the same.
Well, distortion's a little bit. It's a little grainier. It's a little heavier.
What's overdrive? Give me an example of overdrive.
Like a Rat would be a good example of a distortion pedal.
Okay, but what about overdrive then?
It'd be like the Nobles. So you like with
like
overdrive,
to my ears, I hear distorted guitar. Like I don't distinguish between overdrive and distortion.
Yeah, I think it might be a feel thing too. It's like
I also think it's in the wave. They're squared off more when it's distortion.
Oh yeah.
I think that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I was unaware.
Yeah.
And then after your distortion circuit, is there like delay and modulations, effects? What?
Yeah. Usually I'll hit like right now I'm using a vibrato, like a old VB2, or sometimes I'll throw a chorus in that spot, and then from there I don't use a ton of, I guess maybe a ton of modulation. I do still have the Line 6 M5, which is a multi.
Yeah.
It's been out for ever and ever, but I can get different modulate. If I need like a phase or
right,
like a vibe, univibe thing or something. If I'm trying to get all like David Gilmour, so yeah, it kind of goes through those two pedals. And then I'll hit, I think I'm going to like delay next, probably. Delay, which I'm using the Timeline right now. I was using a Source Audio Nemesis, which I love the tone of those things. It's really, really good. But I was having trouble, this is one thing that like in Nashville, we just move pretty fast. I feel like I haven't ever really done records out on the West Coast, but I'm sure those guys move quick too. But from what I've heard,
no, I think Nashville's way faster.
Nashville's way faster. Right?
Way faster, yeah.
So I had to go back to, because of that, I went back to this Timeline made by Strymon, and I'm just really fast with it, and I like that it has the clock on it, so I can ask the engineer, okay, what's our tempo? If I need to do time-based effects, I can instantly call that up, and so while I love the tone of the Source Audio stuff, it's just not as fast for me.
So every guitar player is like a fickle boyfriend with their pedal board. Yeah. It's like you acknowledge that you love all your pedals, but only some of them get on the pedal board at any given time, and it's completely arbitrary as to the reason that they're on the pedal board, right? It's
right.
And it's like you don't want to give up any of the other pedals because you recognize that they're still beauties, but at the end of the day, it's like you can't really explain why it is and what it is that's on your pedal board. You're going to have a compressor, you're going to have some distortion, you're going to then go into modulation and usually delay, and then you're going to go with a volume pedal usually out, right? I mean, that's the general synopsis. It is like, hey, this is what the date looks like tonight. We know we're going to hit these 4 categories. I just haven't decided who's going to come out on the date with me. It's like whatever suits you at the time.
100%.
But the problem is I do the same thing, but my guitar tone is so crappy. Like I've got all these guys come in, you come in, I'm like, oh, I'm going to grab that pedal. I love the way it sounded. And I buy one. It's like, it's crap. I hate it. I can't make it sound any good. So the beauty of the really great Nashville session guys is that they're able to reach into their bag of pedals, which probably change the sound more than anything, right? More than guitars, more than amps. I mean, they're all critical parts, but the real voodoo of the sound is happening on the pedal board. And it's like they're able every time to come up with this like beautiful whatever they're given. They build this salad of, that they serve up. It's like, holy crap, that's a great guitar player.
Yeah. It's funny. JT has this, he always says, oh, I got this new amp. You guys know who I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, JT Cornfloss.
Right? So he's like, got this new amp, and it only took 2 weeks for it to sound like me again.
Yeah, man. And that's funny because that's the same thing in songwriting. It's the same thing in mixing records. Yeah. It's like that's half of what I love about Nashville is that I can go in and like become friends and like connect with a guy like you, and then I get to be you. My song gets to be a little bit of you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. It's like that's the really cool thing about Nashville. You're really great at what you do, and you're awesome. You've risen to the top of whatever, but you're still just the same pathetic you as you always have been, and you get sick of what it is that you continually do over and over again. But for me, I get to take that, which is still a cool thing that I'm making, right? But I'm tired and sick of it. I get to bring it into a session, or I get to write with a guy like Mike Shimshack, and we get something totally different than what I'm doing. And then we take our little collaboration that's just enough not each other, right? The things we hate about ourselves, and it's just the right amount of each other. We take it to a band full of guys that we know have the feeling and want our best interests, that are symbiotic with what we want to feel without being too specific. And if we can be specific, like we have the ability, but we don't want to use that part of our brain. We want to live in the right part of our brain. And then a guy like you comes on, and we get to add drums, bass guitars, piano, utility, and guitar and electric guitars on it. And all those guys make it a little less us, but in a beautiful way. This is what I like most about Nashville. And I didn't really get it in New York or LA. This is like the best version of me, is being able to sort of transformerize myself and have like Legos take another part of someone else and bring it in. Those are my favorite things to do now, because I'm sick of like playing guitar. I'm sick of just like being so predictable, the same gags, the same garbage, that it's just like I'm regurgitating the same things I do every year, and I'm just bored to tears. And you guys have done a really good job at that's why I hire guys like you.
Wow. I mean, yeah. Go ahead.
I got a question for you, Mike. This is I've always wondered this about like session guys. So when you come in, right, and you do work really fast, and you work in 3-hour blocks, right? Mm-hmm. Is how long, for those that don't know, they work in 3-hour blocks in Nashville. How much pressure do you feel to kind of just give them a tone you know is going to work versus a tone that you would really like to dig for, you know? Mm-hmm. And you don't have time really to do a whole lot of experimentation in 3 hours, especially when they're trying to get you to do 5 songs, you know? Like, how do you balance that?
Man, I can sometimes be bad about that, because like, I don't know, I'm a bit of a contemplator, and I like, if I hear something in my head, like I'll chase it, you know, like, and if I think that something isn't quite right, like I'll be adjusting pedals like during a take, right? You know, because I'm not there yet, and it can slow me down. I mean, you know, and so I have to try to find, you know, the sweet spot of like, all right, I know I need to be efficient here, but I also want to try to chase. I'm hearing something that I'm not there yet. So like, how do I, and you know, and that's just a day by day thing. Sometimes like, you know, sometimes you have more time, right? And you're able to do those kind of things. And other times you just kind of set up and go.
But I found that when I'm working on records and I have all the time in the world, sometimes I go past the spot and then suck all the life out of it. You ever do that? Where it's like, we had a guitar tune an hour and a half ago that was better than this one, and we don't even know what we want anymore.
That happens.
You know, here's what guitar players like you do in a session that you may not even realize you're doing this, but you deductively get a sound. You know, it's a single coil sound, or it's a double coil sound. So your guitar selection is made, right? And then it's like, it's in this ballpark, and then it's got this, and it's got that. And you talk to the producer a little bit, and it's like, okay, and you've got it. And then the first 3 takes, you're adjusting your pedals. And by the take that matters, you guys are kind of all the way there. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like to watch it happen, it may seem like you're always fiddling, but man, you're so quickly in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Very rarely do I ever stop and say, Mike, I don't know what that is, but it doesn't, can we try something else? And very rarely do we have to get on a different, you know, train and go somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's always close. So you're just making these little adjustments. And yeah, that's, so yeah. don't know. I can't remember. Yeah. What was the question?
No. You basically answered it. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
I was just wondering how you do that, how you navigate the short time period with trying to create fresh tones, you know, but you don't have a ton of time to do it. I suppose that comes back to your knowing your gear and choosing the gear that you know how to get that stuff quickly, and you know.
Well, it really aren't there only a couple of tones, like, you know, genre wise.
I mean, yeah.
You're gonna have a distortion tone, and you're gonna have a clean tone. You're gonna have a 12-string tone. You're gonna have, you know, how many tones are there, like, that you go down to find these tones?
Yeah, I mean, Joe, that's kind of the way I look at it. I try not to overcomplicate it, but Mike, to your point, I think that sometimes some of that experimentation of like, oh man, I'm getting a little bored. Like, why don't I dive into a couple things and see if I can find some creativity? And so a lot of times I'll do that at the house, you know, like where I'm not on the session. And that's something I learned from Jerry Mack. Like he does a good bit of sound exploration at his place, so that when he travels out, he has something new to, you know, to maybe throw out. And so
that's a great point.
Yeah,
it's like those guys on motorcycles who practice the flips into the styrofoam container, and they're like, "Oh, this is the opportunity in the session now for me to do this thing I spent an hour figuring out."
Right.
Totally. Yeah, 100%. But you're right though, Joe. It's only they're really. I don't know. I've always been like, most of all my favorite recordings, it's like, it's just a great guitar tone. You know, it's not too tricky. Like, unless it's, I don't know, even like, I'm a huge Andy Summers fan, you know, all the Police stuff. And, you know, he had a few tricky tones, but usually it was only like one effect,
right?
Or like it wasn't even his stuff wasn't too outside when you listen to it back. It's like, okay, there's a chorus. Okay, he stacked a compressor and I don't know, some modulation together,
right?
But anyway, so yeah.
So like Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine, right? Where it's like DJ solos, where you're not changing the face of what the instrument is. You know, it's.
I mean, look at his pedalboard. He's got like 3 things on his pedalboard. It's like a boost. It's a whammy pedal, and I think like an old Boss delay. I mean, literally, it's like. And he gets all those.
Hey, and what's the deal with those guys? It's like if there was ever a time for Rage Against the Machine to be back, like they were social and political climate, how are they not out playing for the top of buildings right now?
Well, they were booked. They were booked for festivals.
I thought they were just going to go to one, like Bonnaroo or something.
No, I know they were playing they had a whole tour booked and sold out in like minutes.
Oh my goodness.
Well, yeah, it just feels like if there was ever, it would probably be too dangerous.
Yeah.
To have Rage Against the Machine, like have people out there going so like full tilt and then have Rage. Like if I were out, I would start smashing stuff. If Rage was playing, just the whole country would go up in flames.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you see? Yeah, go ahead.
The CIA probably met with them and said, look, you can't give us a break. You got to just stay inside for 6 months.
A little quick Tom Morello thing. Have you guys seen any of the stuff he did with Springsteen?
Yeah, the Ghost Tom Joad stuff.
Like Tom Joad stuff.
Yeah.
Freaking brilliant, man.
It's incredible. Yeah, it was incredible.
I saw Tom live with the Boss. I guess it's probably 4 years ago now or something like that. It was just really cool.
Yeah,
really cool.
He's an incredible guitar player.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right, pal. Well, thanks for hanging out with us. Is your Instagram where you want people to? We're going to post your links in how to people to contact you. You do probably a bunch of remote session stuff that if folks want, Mike Payne playing on the records from anywhere on the planet, they can send them to Mike. And where would they get to you?
Yeah, it's Mike J Payne is my Instagram handle.
Payne.
Payne.
I have a question for you guys because I'm not big into Instagram. I've never really. I'm there, but I'm not there. Do you need that @ sign in front on Instagram?
I think
No,
so.
I think that just signifies to go to Instagram. You can just type in Mike J Payne and it'll pop up on Instagram.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
when you're searching for it. Yeah.
And that's the best place, Instagram?
That's the best place.
Okay, they can DM me on there and get a hold of you.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm on Facebook as well.
We'll put that link too, but we'll do yourself a favor, and you're not gonna like be spending your kids' college money to do this. I mean, Nashville guys work on bulk. Sessions are actually surprisingly affordable whenever people from the outside world see the caliber of musician they can get, just because of the way the economy works down here. And it's more about working all the time with people rather than working one time. So you can afford Mike Payne to play on your record, and you would be well served. That's a great investment. He's got great gear at his place, and he's just a breeze to work with. He is the perfect storm of someone to hire. So do yourself a favor and get on the horn and get him to play on your record. He's spectacular. We love him here. Thank you, buddy, for hanging out with us. You're a good soul.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Mike.
Have a great rest of your day. From the West Barn, signing off.